The morning mist clung to the mountain valleys like a shroud when Kyle first heard the whispers. He was mucking out the royal stables, his worn boots squelching in the hay and mud, when a strange warmth crept up his spine. The horses grew restless, their eyes rolling white, and even the usually calm war horses began to paw at their stall doors. Kyle had worked in King Aldrich's stables since he was 7 years old. Now 17, he knew every horse by name, every creak of the wooden beams, every shadow that fell across the stone floors. His life was simple: wake before dawn, feed the horses, clean the stalls, and fall asleep to the sound of gentle nickering. He owned nothing but the clothes on his back and a small wooden dragon his mother had carved before she died. That morning was different. The air itself seemed to hum with an energy that made his skin prickle. As he reached for his pitchfork, his hand began to glow with a faint golden light. He stared at it, frozen in disbelief, watching as ancient symbols appeared and disappeared across his palm like living tattoos. "What in the 7 kingdoms?" he muttered, shaking his hand as if he could fling away the strange markings. The stable doors burst open. Master Roland, the stable master, stood there with his face pale as fresh parchment. Behind him, the castle guards were running toward the main courtyard, their armor clanging in panic. "Boy!" Roland barked. "Get to the cellar now!" "What's happening?" Cale asked, but Roland was already gone, swept away in the tide of fleeing servants. Through the open doors, Cale saw it, a shadow passing over the sun. Too large to be any bird. The shadow circled once, twice, and then a sound like thunder split the air. But it wasn't thunder. It was a roar that seemed to come from the beginning of time itself. The horses went mad. They kicked and screamed, breaking through their stall doors in their terror. Cale barely managed to dodge a fleeing mare before he was knocked to the ground. As he pushed himself up, covered in hay and dirt, he noticed something impossible. The horses weren't running from the stable, they were running from him. His hands were blazing now, golden fire that didn't burn but seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. The wooden dragon in his pocket grew hot, and when he pulled it out, it too was glowing with the same ethereal light. Another roar shook the castle walls. Stones fell from the ceiling, and Kyle knew he should run. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but something else, something deeper than instinct, pulled him toward the courtyard. He stumbled out into chaos. Knights were shouting orders, archers knocked arrows with trembling hands, and servants ran in every direction like ants from a disturbed hill. Above them all, circling like a storm cloud given form, was a dragon. Not just any dragon. This creature was ancient beyond measure, its scales black as midnight but shot through with veins of silver that caught the light like stars. Its eyes were pools of molten gold, and when they fixed on Cale, the world seemed to stop. The dragon landed with ground-shaking force. Its head, larger than a cottage, lowered until it was level with the terrified crowd. Steam rose from its nostrils, and when it spoke, the words bypassed the ears and rang directly in every mind present. "Where is the blood of kings? Where is the heir of the ancient pact?" King Aldrich himself emerged from the castle, his crown glinting in the morning sun. He was a good king, fair and just, but Cale could see his knees shaking beneath his royal robes. "I am king here," Aldrich announced, his voice admirably steady. "What business have you with my kingdom, Ancient One?" The dragon's laughter was like an avalanche. "You? You are king of men, perhaps, but you are not the king I seek. The stars have spoken. The bloodline awakens. The true heir stands among you." The dragon's great head swung back and forth, searching. Kyle tried to shrink back, to hide among the crowd, but the golden fire in his hands flared brighter. The wooden dragon in his pocket burned like a coal. Those ancient eyes found him. "There," the dragon rumbled. "Come forward, child of 2 worlds." Every eye in the courtyard turned to Cale, the stable boy covered in hay and horse dung, with his patched tunic and muddy boots. Some laughed nervously. Surely the dragon was mistaken. That's just Kale, someone whispered. The orphan stable boy. But Kale's feet moved without his permission. Each step felt like walking through honey, slow and dreamlike. The crowd parted before him like water, some reaching out as if to stop him, others backing away from the golden fire that now engulfed both his hands. I don't understand, Kyle said when he stood before the dragon. Up close, he could see his own reflection multiplied 1,000 times in its scales. I'm nobody. My mother was a washerwoman. I don't know who my father was. The dragon lowered its great head until its eye was level with Kale's face. In that golden depth, Kale saw visions. A great war, dragons filling the sky like a river of scales and fire. A king standing before them with a crown of flames. Your mother was indeed a washerwoman, the dragon said. But your father was the last of the dragon lords, hidden among men, waiting for the stars to align once more. You carry the blood of both worlds, Kale of the stables. You are the bridge between what was and what must be. The wooden dragon in Kale's pocket suddenly erupted in true flame. He yanked it out, expecting to be burned, but the fire was cool to his touch. As he watched, the wooden carving began to move, tiny wings spreading, miniature eyes opening. Impossible, King Aldrich breathed. Nothing is impossible when the old magic wakes, the dragon replied. The seals are breaking. The ancient enemy stirs in the north. We have slept for 500 years waiting for the bloodline to manifest again, and now, at last, it has. Kale's mind reeled. This morning he had been worried about nothing more than which stall to clean first. Now a dragon was telling him he was some sort of prophesied heir. But I don't know any magic. I can't even read properly. How can I be what you say? Knowledge can be taught. Power can be awakened. But blood cannot be changed. You are what you are, Kale Dragonhair, whether you will it or not. The small wooden dragon, now very much alive, perched on Kale's shoulder and chirped. Where it touched him, Kale felt a surge of memory that wasn't his own, flying through clouds, breathing fire, speaking in the tongue of dragons. I need time, Kyle said weakly. I need to think. Time is what we do not have. The great dragon rumbled. Already the ice walkers march. Already the dead rise in the forgotten places. The dragons wake because the danger wakes. You must come with us now, or all will be lost. Where? Kale asked, though part of him already knew. To the dragon throne, where your true education begins. To the heart of the mountains, where you will either claim your birthright or die in the attempt. King Aldrich stepped forward then, placing a hand on Kale's shoulder. Boy, you don't have to go. You're under my protection. But even as the king spoke, Kale could see the truth in his eyes. Aldrich was afraid. Of the dragon, yes, but more afraid of what might happen if Kale stayed. A dragon lord in his stable. The heir to power that made human kingdoms look like children's games. No, Kale said quietly. If what this dragon says is true, then I have to go. I can't spend my life hiding in horse stalls. He looked at his glowing hands, at the living dragon that had been his mother's last gift. Maybe she knew. Maybe that's why she carved this for me. The great dragon rumbled approval. Wisdom beyond your years. Yes, she knew. She loved your father, knew what he was, what you would become. She died protecting you from those who would use your blood for dark purposes. This revelation hit Kale like a physical blow. His mother, killed not by winter sickness as he'd been told, but murdered for protecting him. Anger flared in his chest, and with it the golden fire spread up his arms. Who? He asked, his voice dangerous. Who killed her? That is a truth for another day. First, you must learn to master what you are, or you will burn yourself and everyone around you to ash. Will you come? Kyle looked around the courtyard one last time. At the castle that had been his home, at the fearful faces of people he'd known all his life, at King Aldrich, who had been kind to him in his way. Then he looked up at the dragon, at the promise of answers and power and purpose. "I'll come," he said. The dragon's satisfaction was like warmth from a forge. "Then climb upon my back, young king. Your subjects await." "Subjects?" Kyle asked as he approached the dragon's lowered wing. "Did you think I came alone? The flight of dragons fills the sky beyond these mountains. They have all come to see if you are worthy of the throne that has stood empty for 5 centuries. As Kale climbed the dragon's scales, using them like a ladder, he felt the world he knew falling away. The stable boy was dying with each step upward, and something else, something ancient and powerful, was being born. He settled between 2 great spinal ridges and immediately felt a connection to the dragon, as if they were 2 parts of the same whole. The small dragon on his shoulder trilled happily. "I am Vallyron the Black," the dragon said as he spread his wings. "I was your father's mount, and his father's before him. I have waited long for you, young king." "I'm not a king," Kale protested as Vallyron's wings began to beat, lifting them from the ground. "Not yet," Vallyron agreed. "But you will be, or the world will burn." As they rose into the sky, Kale looked back one last time at the castle growing small beneath them. He could see the upturned faces, the pointing fingers. Tomorrow the story would spread. The stable boy who rode away on a dragon. They would call it a fairy tale, a legend, a lie. But Kale knew better. He could feel the truth in his blood, in the fire that no longer seemed strange but felt like coming home. He was the heir of dragons, whether he wanted to be or not. And somewhere in the north, an ancient evil stirred, waiting for the young king to claim his throne, or fail trying. The dragon throne stood at the heart of Mount Cathazar, carved from a single block of obsidian that seemed to drink in light. Kyle had been flying on Vallyron's back for 3 days, stopping only to rest and hunt. Now, as they approached the ancient stronghold, he saw why humans had never found this place. The mountain itself was a dragon, or had been once. Its peak formed the head, wings spread to create valleys, and the entrance to the throne room was through what had once been the creature's heart. Thousands of dragons perched on every available surface, their scales creating a rainbow of colors against the gray stone. They watched in silence as Vallyron descended. The last Dragon King turned himself to stone to create this sanctuary, Vallyron explained as they landed on a platform of polished black glass. His sacrifice has protected us for 1,000 years. Now we must see if you are worthy of his legacy. Kale slid from Vallyron's back, his legs shaky after so long in the air. The wooden dragon, which he had named Ember, chirped encouragement from his shoulder. As his feet touched the platform, every dragon in sight lowered their heads. The gesture should have been reassuring, but Kale found it terrifying. What if they decided he wasn't worthy? What would dragons do to a false king? "They will not harm you," Vallyron said, reading his thoughts as easily as ever. "But neither will they accept you without proof. Come, the trials await." The throne room was vast, beyond imagination. Pillars of twisted stone rose like trees, and the ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. But it was the throne itself that stole Kale's breath. It wasn't just carved from obsidian, it was alive with dragon magic. Runes crawled across its surface like living things, and the air around it shimmered with heat. 7 ancient dragons waited before the throne. Unlike Vallyron, who was large but sleek, these dragons were massive beyond scale. Their eyes held the weight of eons, and their scales were faded with age to the color of old parchment. "Kale of the 2 bloods," the centermost dragon spoke, her voice like grinding stone. "I am Mithara the eldest. We are the Council of Seven, the last of the first dragons. You claim the blood of kings? I don't claim anything, Kyle said honestly. Valyron says I have Dragon Lord blood. I'm just trying to understand what that means. Honesty. Good. Another dragon, this one with scales of tarnished gold, leaned forward. But honesty alone does not make a king. You must pass 3 trials: flame, flight, and fear. Fail any, and the throne will consume you. Kale swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Then the north will fall. The Ice Walkers will cover the world in frozen death, and both dragon and humankind will perish, Mithara said simply. The throne must have a king to channel our combined power against the ancient enemy. Your father knew this. He gave his life trying to hold them back alone. My father fought them? Kale asked eagerly. Any information about his mysterious parent was precious. Later, Mithara said. First, the trials. Will you attempt them? Kale looked at Ember on his shoulder, at Valyron standing proud beside him, at the 7 ancient judges. He thought of his mother, murdered for protecting him, of a father he'd never known, who died fighting some terrible enemy, of the comfortable, stable life he'd left behind. I'll try, he said. The first trial began immediately. Mithara breathed out a stream of fire that engulfed Kale completely. He screamed, expecting agony, but instead felt the golden fire within him rise to meet the dragon flame. The 2 forces danced around each other, testing, tasting, judging. His clothes burned away, but his skin remained untouched. The wooden dragon, Ember, transformed fully in the flames, growing to the size of a house cat, her scales now gleaming like rubies. When the flames died, Kale stood naked but unharmed, his body covered in the same moving tattoos that had first appeared on his palms. A young dragon brought him new clothes, not the rough homespun of a stable boy, but the scaled leather armor of a dragon rider. You have dragon fire in your blood, Mithara announced. The first trial is past. The second trial seemed impossible. They led him to the edge of a chasm that plunged so deep he couldn't see the bottom. Spanning it was a bridge of air, literally nothing but condensed wind and dragon magic. Cross, commanded the golden dragon. A true dragon lord can walk on air when need demands. Kale stared at the invisible bridge. Every instinct said this was madness. But Ember launched herself from his shoulder and hovered over the chasm, chittering encouragement. If she believed in him. He took the first step. His foot found purchase on nothing, held up by faith and blood-right alone. Another step, then another. Halfway across, he made the mistake of looking down. The magic flickered, and he started to fall. No! He shouted, and the golden fire blazed from his hands. He caught himself, hovering in mid-air, understanding flooding through him. He wasn't walking on the bridge. He was flying without wings, held aloft by the same power that let dragons soar. He didn't walk the rest of the way. He flew, laughing with the sheer joy of it, landing on the far side with a flourish that made even the ancient dragons rumble with approval. The second trial is past, the council announced. Now comes the hardest. They brought him back to the throne. Up close, he could see that the obsidian surface was actually a mirror, reflecting not his face, but his deepest fears. Sit, Mithara commanded. A king must face what he fears most. The throne will show you yours. Overcome it, or be consumed. Kale approached slowly. The throne seemed to grow larger with each step, until it loomed over him like a hungry mouth. He turned, sat, and immediately wished he hadn't. The world disappeared. He was in a frozen wasteland, surrounded by walking corpses with blue fire in their eyes. Leading them was a figure in armor made of ice and shadow, and when it removed its helm, Kyle saw his own face staring back. But wrong. Twisted. Evil. You will become me, the Ice Kyle said. Power corrupts. Dragon fire burns the good with the bad. You will try to save the world and end up destroying it. Everyone you love will die by your hand." The vision shifted. He saw himself older, sitting on this same throne, but alone. Mountains of dragon bones surrounded him. Human cities burned in the distance. Ember lay dead at his feet, killed by his own flame in a moment of rage. "No," Kyle whispered. "That's not me. That won't be me." "Won't it?" Icecale laughed. "You already feel it. The anger at your mother's death. The desire for revenge. The intoxication of power. How long before you justify one death, then two, then thousands?" The throne's magic pressed down on him, showing him future after future where he became the monster, where his power corrupted him, where loneliness drove him mad, where the line between saving the world and ruling it blurred beyond recognition. But then, small and bright in the darkness, Ember appeared, not dead, but alive, dancing through the nightmare flames. And her light showed him other futures, ones where he used his power to protect, not destroy, where he united dragons and humans, where he found family among both races. "Power doesn't corrupt," Kale said, understanding flooding through him. "Fear corrupts. Fear of loss, fear of weakness, fear of being alone, but I'm not alone." He stood from the throne, the visions shattering like glass. "I have Ember. I have Valyron. I have teachers in the council. I don't have to become that thing. I choose not to." The throne room erupted in dragon roars, approval, celebration, acknowledgement. The throne itself began to glow, its obsidian surface becoming transparent, revealing a core of pure starlight. "The third trial is past," Mythera announced, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely impressed. "You saw the hardest truth, that the greatest enemy of a king is himself, and chose hope over fear. Kale Dragonhair approached the throne again, this time as its rightful king." Kale walked forward, no longer afraid. As he sat, the throne's magic flowed into him, not consuming but completing. He felt the connection to every dragon in the mountain, felt their strength become his, felt their ancient wisdom touch his mind. But with the power came knowledge, terrible knowledge. He saw what the Ice Walkers truly were, what approached from the north. Not just an army, but entropy itself, the ending of all things, held back for millennia by dragon fire and human courage. "Now you understand," Valorant said softly, "why we needed you, why the bloodline had to survive." Kyle gripped the throne's arms, feeling the weight of destinies, dragon and human alike, settling on his shoulders. He was no longer a stable boy. That life was as dead as his old clothes, burned away in dragon fire. "When do they come?" he asked. "They are already moving," Mythera replied. "You have perhaps a month to master your powers before the first assault. A month to learn what dragon lords trained for decades to achieve. A month to forge an alliance between races that had been separated for centuries. A month to become the king both worlds needed." Kale stood from the throne, and every dragon bowed. "Then we'd better get started. The morning of the battle came too soon." Kale stood on the highest tower of Mount Cathazar, watching the horizon turn black with approaching death. The Ice Walkers moved like a plague across the land, turning green fields to frozen wasteland with each step. At their head rode the Night King, the first of the corrupted dragon lords, who had traded his fire for ice 1,000 years ago. 1 month. That's all the time Kale had been given to prepare, and he'd used every second. His body bore new scars from training. His mind buzzed with dragon lore and battle magic. And his connection to the dragons had grown until he could speak to any of them across vast distances. But was it enough? Ember, now the size of a horse, nuzzled his shoulder. She had grown rapidly, fed by his power and their bond. Through her eyes, he could see what she saw: the fear in the dragon ranks, the doubt that even their assembled might could stop what was coming. "They're afraid," Kale said to Valiran, who stood beside him. They remember the last war, the ancient dragon replied. We lost half our number before driving the Night King back, and he has had 1,000 years to grow stronger while we slept. Kale touched the sword at his side. Dawnfire, forged in dragon flame from star metal, one of only 3 weapons that could harm the Night King. His armor, grown from dragon scales freely given, hummed with protective magic. He looked like a king, but inside he still felt like a stable boy facing a storm. The humans? He asked. King Aldrich leads them. 20,000 soldiers march from the south, but they won't arrive before nightfall. Too late. The Ice Walkers would reach the mountain by noon. Kale closed his eyes, reaching out with his newfound senses, touching the minds of his dragon army. 300 dragons answered his call, from ancient Mithera to younglings barely out of the egg. It should have been enough to conquer the world. Against the army of the dead, it might not be enough to save it. My king, Mithera's voice echoed in his mind. It is time. The enemy crosses the Valley of Bones. Kyle mounted Valiran, settling into the saddle that had become as natural as walking. Ember took her place beside them, small but fierce. Around them, dragons launched from every perch, their wings blotting out the sun. The air rang with their battle cries, a sound that would have sent armies fleeing in any other circumstance. But the dead did not flee. They did not even pause. The first clash was catastrophic. Dragon fire met ice magic in explosions that shook the mountains. The dead fell by the hundreds, burned to ash. But for everyone destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Ice spears brought down dragons from the sky, their death screams terrible to hear. Kale and Valiran dove into the thick of battle, dawnfire blazing with golden flame. Where the blade touched, the dead didn't just fall. They were unmade, the dark magic animating them severed completely. But there were so many, an ocean of frozen corpses stretching to the horizon. There! Ember's sharp eyes spotted movement. The Night King! He stood on a hill of ice, beautiful and terrible, his armor gleaming like frozen starlight. In his hand was a spear of pure cold, and his eyes were the blue of the deepest winter, empty of everything but hunger. Kale felt those eyes find him across the battlefield. The Night King smiled and raised his spear. The temperature plummeted, and every dragon in the air screamed as ice began forming on their wings. They fell like stones, crashing to the earth. No! Kyle reached out with his power, wrapping his dragons in cocoons of flame. It helped, but the effort left him gasping. He couldn't protect them all and fight at the same time. The Night King's voice carried on the wind, each word a shard of ice. Young king, last of the dragon lords. I offer you what I offered your father. Join me, embrace the ice, live forever as my prince, and I will spare your dragons. My father refused you, Kale shouted back. So do I. Your father died screaming as the cold took him. You will too. The battle raged for hours. Dragons fell, their bodies adding to the mountains of the dead. The Ice Walkers pressed forward, an inexorable tide. Kyle fought until his arms ached, until dawnfire grew heavy in his hand, until even Valiran's great strength began to flag. Then he saw her. Mithera, the eldest, the mother of dragons, fell from the sky with a dozen ice spears in her heart. She crashed to the earth with a sound like the world ending, her ancient eyes finding Kale's in her last moment. Remember, she whispered in his mind. Fire and ice were once one. The Night King was like you. Before he chose wrong, you are 2 bloods, 2 worlds. Be the bridge. She died, and her death broke something in the dragon ranks. They began to retreat, flying back toward the mountain. The Ice Walkers surged forward, sensing victory, but Mithera's words echoed in Kale's mind. 2 bloods, 2 worlds, the bridge. Valeron, he said suddenly. Take me to him, to the Night King. That's suicide. No, it's the only way. Trust me, old friend. Valeron roared but obeyed, diving toward the hill of ice. The Night King waited, patient as winter, his spear ready. But Kale did something unexpected. He dismounted, landing on the frozen ground, and sheathed Dawnfire. You offer to join me after all? The Night King asked, amused. I offer you redemption, Kale replied. He reached for his power, but not just the dragon fire. He reached for the other part, the human part, the part that could choose. Understanding bloomed in the Night King's frozen features. You know. I know you were like me, a bridge between worlds. But you chose to break the bridge, to embrace only one side. The ice consumed you because you rejected the fire. Kyle held out his hand, and in it both powers danced. Dragon fire and something else, something he'd inherited from his human mother. The warmth of choice, of change, of hope. It's not too late, Kale said. You've been winter for so long, you've forgotten spring exists. But I can feel it in you, buried under 1,000 years of ice. The man you were, the king you could have been. The Night King stared at Kale's outstretched hand. Around them, the battle had stopped, both sides watching this impossible moment. If I touch your fire, I will burn, the Night King said. No, Kale said firmly. You'll thaw. For a long moment, the Night King stood frozen. Then, slowly, he reached out and grasped Kale's hand. The explosion of power knocked everyone, living and dead, to their knees. Fire and ice met, swirled, danced, and merged. The Night King screamed as 1,000 years of winter cracked and fell away like old armor. The Ice Walkers collapsed, the magic animating them severed not by destruction, but by transformation. When the light faded, a man stood where the Night King had been. Old beyond measure, weary beyond words, but alive. Human. The spear of winter had become a staff of simple wood. My name, he whispered, wonder in his voice, is Theron. I had forgotten my name. Kale caught him as he fell, the weight of centuries crushing down. Around them, dragons landed, humans arrived, all staring at the impossible scene. The war is over, Kale announced, his voice carrying on wind and flame. Not won through death, but through redemption. This is the world we build now, not ice or fire alone, but both in balance. Ember landed on his shoulder, trilling joy. Valeron rumbled approval. Even the surviving members of the council bowed their great heads in acknowledgement of wisdom beyond years. Theron looked up at Kyle with eyes that were blue still, but warm, like summer sky. You did what I could not. You kept both halves of yourself. How? Kyle thought of his mother, the washerwoman who loved a dragon lord. His father, who died fighting instead of yielding. The horses in the stable who taught him patience. Mithara, who taught him wisdom. All the influences that had shaped him. I remembered that I was born in a stable, Kyle said simply. Dragons chose me as king, but I chose to remain human too. That's the real power, not fire or ice, but choice. As the sun set on the battlefield, Kyle stood between two worlds, dragons above, humans below, and he himself the bridge between them. The stable boy who became a king, not through conquest, but through compassion. In years to come, they would sing songs of this day, not of the great battle, but of the moment when a young king chose to offer his hand instead of his sword. They would call him Kale the Bridger, Kale the Wise, Kale of Two Worlds. But in his own heart, he would always be Kale of the stables, who learned from horses to be gentle, from dragons to be strong, and from both to be kind. The frozen north began to thaw. Dragons and humans worked together to rebuild, and somewhere in the distance, spring flowers bloomed through melting snow, proof that even the longest winter must eventually yield to hope. Theron, freed from his curse, became Cale's advisor, teaching him about the balance of power. "You succeeded where I failed," he would often say. And Cale would always reply, "No, we succeeded together. That's what bridges are for." The throne of dragons had its king. But more importantly, the world had its guardian, not of fire or ice, but of the balance between them. And in that balance, both dragons and humans found their future. The stable boy's journey was complete. The king's had just begun.